Behavior recently made a fairly important change to combat the growing discontent Dead by Daylight players have had with map offerings. They changed the Sacrificial Ward offering from rare to common, in other words, from green to brown, making it much easier to obtain. This means players have a lot more sack wards available, so they can routinely bring them into the game to cancel out the map offerings. While that does its job, I think ultimately it's just a band-aid fix and doesn't address the core problems of map offerings, and it removes agency from players to bring other offerings, like blood point offerings. It's now a player's responsibility to bring a sack ward and give up the extra blood points from a cake or a pudding or whatever else there may be. Or if you're going for an adept, your choice is to bring a hatch location, so you know you can close the hatch and get the 4th kill. Or you can bring a sack ward to guarantee that you don't go to a bad map. Well, it's great that it's easier to bring sack wards. I think there are other problems that still need to be addressed with map offerings. And that after that, sack wards can probably go back to being a green tier offering, or maybe a yellow tier offering as well. The main problem with map offerings in their current state, it stems from the core issue that maps are not all balanced. I think with the number of maps they have and the variety that they need to have in order to be different, it's not reasonable to expect all 53, soon to be 54, maps and their variants to be perfectly balanced. This wouldn't necessarily be inherently bad if map offerings couldn't guarantee a map. For example, Eyrie of Crows is a strong survivor map, and it's also the only map in the Forsaken Boneyard realm, which means the Crow's Eye offering will always send you to Eyrie of Crows. Likewise, with the strong killer map in Lambkin Lane, the Haddonfield realm only contains that map, so the Strode Realty Key will always send you to Lambkin Lane. Dead Dog Saloon, Larry's Treatment Theater, The Game, Midwich, these are all maps that also are the only map in their realm. There's a fairly sizable collection of maps with only one option. These kinds of offerings give the players the ability to dictate the map 100% unless someone else uses a sack ward. I don't think this is a healthy state where map offerings can dictate the singular map. So I think that is something that is important still to change to fully address map offerings. The second major issue, this is a bigger issue for me personally, but I can understand why some people don't care, especially longer term players. There's 21 map offerings in the game right now. There's only 2 green tier offerings on each side that are not map offerings. This means the Blood Web is completely flooded with map offerings. If you don't want map offerings, you don't like using them, you prefer to leave it up to the RNG of the game, you're just getting bombarded with map offerings in the Blood Web anyway. There's not that many, even outside of offerings, there's not that many different green tier items. This is an image of a prestige 65 character survivor with a roughly level 30-ish blood web. There's only 5 green items at all in the blood web. One of them is a broken green key, and the other 4 are all map offerings. If I don't want to use map offerings, I just don't get a green item, basically. And even if you are a fan of using map offerings, having 21 different ones means you're less likely to get the ones that you want. Even if all the maps were well balanced and you had 21 different offerings for fairly balanced maps, you're still, if a map offering rolls or a green tier item rolls, it's still a 1 in 23 or whatever chance it is to get the one map offering that you want. So I'm no fan of map offerings, but it's largely because of their current state. I've talked to some people before who like them and try to understand how players want them to use them. Ultimately, the biggest problem is balance, but the benefits of using a map offering can also be to use a specific kind of build. Obviously, there's like toxic playstyles such as boil over in a specific area of the map where it's hard to hook, which could also be addressed. But builds like balanced landing, who wants to try and use balanced landing on a map that only has a hill, right? Or any kind of similar build style like that. So that's something I try to come up with when I was looking for a solution or thinking of a solution for how map offerings could work in the game. My idea is to heavily condense the map offerings. There's 21 right now. I would go down to 9, possibly even less. 9 is a fairly good number, I think, though. With the new Ormond variant coming soon, we'll have 54 maps and their variants, which means we can put it to 6 maps per offering. This includes stuff like Ormond 1, 2, and 3. They're all individual. Coal Tower 1 and 2, all of the Macmillan maps have multiple variants. Plus the new Ormond variant. This would allow a decent grouping of maps with similar elements, so you could build into the offering still, guaranteeing that you'd have some general idea of what elements would be in the map. For example, you could have a balanced landing build with a bunch of vertical maps, but it would also contain a decent balance of maps which are sided in a certain way. For example, you could have a map with Eyrie of Crows and Garden of Joy because they both have good verticality, spots to use balanced landing, etc. But it also would have Midwich and Haddonfield, which also have lots of good spots to use balanced landing and a lot of verticality, but they're slightly more killer-sided versus the survivor-sided Eyrie and Garden. So they all have lots of options, but it's a mix of killer and survivor-sided maps, so if someone uses a map offering, they aren't just guaranteeing an advantage for themselves. Being condensed down to 9 offerings would also address the Bloodweb issue, as it cut the number of map offerings in half, by more than half, and it would make it more likely that other items could appear, and also more likely that any specific map offering could appear, right? If you're, right now, it's hard to get one specific offering, but if you cut it down to only 9 offerings, it's much easier to get the one you want, and it's much easier to get a different variety of green level offerings and items. I don't have a fully fleshed out idea here of where all of the other maps would fall into the offerings and how you would group them thematically. I don't know any other changes to map offerings have big implications elsewhere, such as several map-specific achievements, and all of the blood points that you have invested in the current offerings, and basically starting from scratch with no offerings if you retire all the current offerings and introduce 9 new ones. If this change happened, I'd love to see a rework to, first of all, the Outbreak Breakout achievement, which is 20 escapes from RPD. Bring it down, opening the doors. Bring it down to a more reasonable number, like 5 maybe, and then tweak the requirements to be like completing 2 gens and escaping, rather than specifically you being the one person who opens a set of doors and escapes. There's only 2 doors in the game, and even if all 4 of you escape, only 2 people can get progress towards the achievement in a match, because they're the ones who open the doors, if you can both get out the doors. And, you know, if you 99 the gates and someone else opens them, they get progress, you don't. So that is overall, I think that achievement just needs a rework, but with the map offering change, that would be more important, because it's harder to get RPD as a map. An exchange program of sorts would be kind of cool, where you can change the current offerings into the new ones. So, for example, if you have 20 Eyrie offerings and Eyrie of Crows ends up in this new vertical map offering, then all those 20 offerings become the new vertical map. But if you had, say, Macmillan, which has 10 different variants in it, 5 maps and each one has a different variant, then those maps would probably all get split into the 9 different offerings in some way. Then Macmillan ones could then be refunded with blood points. So some of those ones, so it give you a decent little base to start with of conversion, and it would refund you a decent amount of blood points. So overall, while I like the change to the sack wards, I still see it as just a band-aid fix to the primary problem of map offerings, which is balance of the maps and how advantageous it is to bring certain maps. But it does nothing to address the blood web issue. Blood web bloat overall is a big issue, but especially I think in the green tier with map offerings, it's most notable and at its worst. So trying to solve both of those things was something that I wanted to figure out in this solution, and I thought this was a pretty good way to do it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts or any other tweaks you would make to this idea. And yeah, thank you for watching.